Welcome back to Riksha Vibhavana, where we take a closer look at the astrology of the week ahead, Sunday, November 23rd to Saturday, November 29th. First, the highlights of the week ahead. The Sun recently changed sign from Scorpio to Sagittarius, shifting the collective tone from Scorpio's depth to the Centaur's focus on action and Dharma. Around midweek, Venus moves into an exact trine configuration to Jupiter and Saturn, creating a grand water trine, supporting emotional clarity, stability, and healing. Towards the end of the week, Saturn stations and then goes direct, restoring forward movement in responsibility, structure, and long-term commitments. And at the end of the week, Mercury stations direct, restoring efficiency, mental coherence, and helping us articulate what the retrograde period has revealed. There's a subtle but important Sun-Pluto aspect at the start of the week that adds depth and psychological power to the shift from water to fire. And throughout the week, Mercury retrograde will also mingle with Venus in the sign of Scorpio, adding a charming, affectionate undercurrent to communication, matters of finance, and exchanges of value, preparing us as Mercury then finally moves forward towards the end of the week. So let's begin by taking a closer look at the Sun in Sagittarius. Around 2 days ago, the Sun crossed from Scorpio into Sagittarius, from fixed water into the mutable fire sign of Sagittarius. From a yogic perspective, the Sun is the Pingala Nadi of the collective, the outwards moving, energizing, activating current that gives vitality, direction, and responsiveness to the psyche, and thereby stimulating activity. When the Sun shifts signs, the collective atmosphere changes. Its counterpart, the Moon, represents the Ida Nadi, the inward moving, receptive, cooling, and nourishing current that gathers, absorbs, and integrates experience. Both these currents flank the central axis of consciousness, the Sushumna channel, or the so-called central channel, the still vertical channel running through the spine. Around this luminous staff, Pingala and Ida weave, meeting at each chakra, spiraling upwards in a double helix of solar and lunar force. This is the very image preserved in the caduceus of Mercury, the staff carried by the Hellenic deity associated with communication, with the central rod as Sushumna and the twin serpents as Pingala and Ida, the circuitry of our own subtle anatomy. When the Sun enters Sagittarius, it is the collective Pingala that is energized. Think of Pikachu charging up to release a thunderbolt. You would want to take special note, therefore, of the area of the chart influenced by the sign of Sagittarius. This is where this Pingala current is manifesting. With this, then, the inward focus of Scorpio is replaced by the outwards ignition of Sagittarius, encouraging us to take in the big picture and, more importantly, to start preparation for taking action in terms of our participation in that bigger picture. Sagittarius, Dhanus, as it's known in Sanskrit, is ruled by Jupiter, the guru of the gods, Brihaspati. It is the 9th sign of the zodiac, the sign of Dharma, initiation, higher learning, philosophy, pilgrimage, and our long-range orientation to the world. It is the sign of the archer, with his bow drawn towards a distant point of truth. And as we enter this Sagittarian month, we also move toward Gita Jayanti on December 1st, the day commemorating the Bhagavad Gita. It is no coincidence that the sun stands in the sign of Dharma as the world prepares to honor a set of timeless teachings that begin with the very word Dharma. There is that famous line at the beginning of the Gita, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, on this field of Dharma, on the field of the Kurus. So Sagittarius, as the 9th sign of the zodiac, has something of a mystical resonance with the Bhagavad Gita that becomes apparent when we consider its numerology. The number 9 has a unique relationship with Dharma because it carries the symbolism of truth that remains stable throughout every transformation, every struggle, every confrontation. In Vedic numerology, 9 is the only number that always returns to itself when multiplied. Whether you multiply it by 2, 3, 4 or 10, the digits always reduce back to 9. This is why 9 is seen as the number of unchanging reality, truth that endures, dharma that cannot be diminished, the deeper order of the cosmos that remains intact even as circumstances shift. This principle is woven into the fabric of Sanatana Dharma, the number 108, the most sacred of numbers when counting mantras, sums to 9, 1 plus 0 plus 8. It encodes the idea that every spiritual practice aims to bring us back to the underlying truth, to the Dharma at the root of being. The Bhagavad Gita itself is structured as 18 chapters, again reducing to 9. Its 9th chapter contains the Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, the king of knowledge and the king of secrets, teachings that point to Dharma as ultimately sustained by devotional surrender, discernment, and the recognition of the divine presence in all beings. Even the Mahabharata war, the very stage on which the Gita is spoken, unfolds over 18 days. Again, we can reduce that to 9. This number is not arbitrary. It reflects how Dharma is tested through conflict, complexity, and moral ambiguity, yet ultimately returns to itself. Just as 9 remains unchanged through multiplication, Dharma remains unchanged through struggle. The battlefield becomes a mirror of this principle. Truth is challenged, it is obscured at times, it's strained, but ultimately it remains what it is. Sagittarius, the 9th sign of the zodiac, carries this same signature, governs meaning, direction, teaching and communicating knowledge, initiation, pilgrimage, the search for that undiminished truth. Thus, the recurrence of 9 in the Gita structure, the war's duration, the sacred number 108, and the position of Sagittarius forms a coherent image. Dharma is the fire that endures through every trial. It is the truth that remains the same, undiminished, through its many forms of expression. Dharma is the fire that endures through every trial. It is the truth that remains the same, undiminished, through its many forms and expressions. So with the sun in Sagittarius, we are encouraged to realign ourselves with Dharma. And to this end, the teachings of the Gita can be most impactful. So then, turning to the astrology of the midweek with Venus in Scorpio forming an exact trine to Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces, continuing this theme of the grand water trine that we looked at last week. And again, you would want to take note of the areas of life influenced by those water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. These areas of life will be particularly supported supported by this trine. If last week plunged us into the depths of Scorpio with retrograde Mercury traversing the same deep transformative waters, this week reconciliatory Venus, sometimes referred to in Sanskrit as Dhatri, the nurse of the zodiac, comes with medicine and band-aids to heal our hurts. We mentioned this significant trine last week, and it's worth reintegrating how supportive this configuration will be to the areas of life dominated by Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. In Scorpio, Venus is in Trishna Avashta, the condition of being thirsty, somewhat unsatiated with the superficial. She wants to visit our deepest wounds. The trine to Jupiter expands the emotional reach of this trine, bringing in compassion and forgiveness, and encourages us to reconnect with feeling. Venus's trine to taskmaster Saturn stabilizes and grounds emotions. Commitments clarify, boundaries form gently but firmly, and depth becomes sustainable. Together, this trine configuration creates a midweek moment of emotional coherence, sweetness, and inner clarity, a healing interval after the intensity of the Scorpio cycle. On a practical note, throughout the week, Mercury will meet up with Venus and add a subtle influence to communication, matters of finance, deal making. This is not a week to finalize major decisions or sign contracts, but to clarify what is of true value underlying these matters. And this brings us to Thursday, November 27th, with Saturn coming to a standstill in the sign of Pisces and then slowly beginning its forward motion. And shortly thereafter, Saturday the 29th, we have Mercury stationing and going direct in Scorpio. And this is big news because together these two planets rule 1/3 of the signs of the zodiac. So Mercury, of course, rules Gemini and Virgo, and Saturn, Capricorn, and Aquarius. So with this change in direction, we can also expect forward momentum to come to these signs and the areas of life in our individual birth charts influenced by Gemini, Virgo, Capricorn, and Aquarius. For Gemini and Virgo, Mercury's direct motion restores mental clarity, communication, planning, study, and the ability to articulate the path forward. For Capricorn and Aquarius, Saturn's direct motion restores structural momentum, discipline, our long-term orientation, and the ability to stabilize commitments that have been suspended or uncertain during Saturn's retrograde phase. Saturn's forward motion is a catalyst for deep work. So you would want to take note of the areas of the chart dominated by Capricorn and Aquarius. We may find ourselves becoming quite productive in those areas with Saturn moving forward. And with Saturn direct at the end of the week, Saturn then also starts moving towards Aries and will eventually enter Aries on February 13th, 2026. And this then will be a major transition, finally leaving the sign of Pisces after around 2.5 years. And then Mercury direct on Saturday in Scorpio will, of course, benefit us all for the most part. Keep in mind that until the middle of December, Mercury will still be retracing its steps. It will be revisiting that area of the sky it retrograded through during the last few weeks. So In many ways, Mercury only comes fully online, so to say, by the middle of December. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Star Watch. I've been your host, Kavi. To explore how these transits shape your own chart or to study this tradition in more depth, you can find me on Instagram at Eye of the Vedas, where I offer consultations and one-on-one tuition. Wishing you a clear, fiery Sagittarius season. Hare Krishna.